I was coaching one of my music production students the other day, and he said something that really kind of made me sit back and remind myself, like, why we do music to begin with. I asked him a question, which I asked all of my students. I asked him, I said, what do you like? What's your 3 year, 5 year plan? If you could think 3 or 5 years out into the future, what do you want to get out of music production? And he said something that I haven't really heard. And he said, I would like something to give to my grandchildren, a little piece of me that I could give to my grandchildren that they could carry on for as long as they want to. And I want to make sure that I make the best version of that for them. And I kind of had to take a step back and go, whoa, that's awesome. Like, I never really thought of it that way. Because most of the time when I ask that question, I get the typical answers. I want to blow up. Like, 3 to 5 years, I'd love to blow up. I'd love to have a song that has 1 million streams on Spotify. I'd love to have 1,000 monthly listeners. I'd love to go tour the world with my band. I'd love to go sell the merch and have this many albums out and all this stuff. And all this stuff's great. I'm not knocking on that at all. Like, one of my goals is I'd love to be a Grammy award-winning producer. I'd love that. That's a goal of mine, and I still think it very well could happen. But pulling that aside, I think it's good to remember that truly at its core, and the reason why we even started to make music in general was because we loved it. And that was it. And I think music is about legacy and music is about story. And so let me explain how this works. So music is an art form, and just like art, and I was talking to my father-in-law, and he said something that was very interesting. He's an artist, and he's been, over the last couple months, he's been making this beautiful painting of Jimi Hendrix, and it's going to be hanging up back here. And we rolled it out, and I was just in awe of how beautiful it was, and the artwork, and it was just gorgeous. I loved every single bit of it. And immediately he starts picking out things that he wishes he would have done differently. And he's been working on this for like several months. And so he's been looking at this and saying, I wish I would have done this differently. Wish I would have done this here. I wish I would have used a different color here. I wish I would have done this. And I'm looking at it, and I'm not seeing anything that he's seeing at all. I don't see it. But what I do see is a beautiful piece of art and a perfect representation of who he is as a creative person. And so I kind of had to stop him and say, look, man, this is beautiful. To me, I don't see what you're talking about. But I think this is a perfect representation of who you are right now as a creative person. You're always going to want to make changes to your art. Everybody does. Even the Beatles have talked about how they wish they could have done things differently. Everybody that's made some form of art that's been out in the world wishes that they could go back in time and make some changes. And it's normal because you're going to get better every single day. But I think that music and any art form in general is about legacy and about having a timepiece of who you are as a creative person at that time. So one last analogy to kind of really drive this home. On my main channel, Producing in the Box, I'm working on this video. I've been working on it for quite a while now. I found the first song I ever produced over a decade ago. So not the first song I ever wrote or anything, but the first song I ever produced that I could actually find like on a file. And it is bad. But I wanted to remake it 10 years later. And obviously the new version is way, way better. Way better. But the old version, even though it wasn't great, it wasn't bad though, because it was still a perfect representation of who I was as an artist then. I wasn't a phenomenal producer, and 10 years from now, I'm going to be a way better producer than I am now. That's the goal. But I shouldn't wait 10 years before I release any more music or work with any more artists or continue producing music like I'm doing now. That would be dumb. I shouldn't do that at all. I need to make the music that I'm making now and get it out there and understand that in the future, I'm going to wish that I could change it, but I can't. And I need to understand that this is a representation and a reflection of who I am right now. So when you are handing that song to your grandkids and say, look what I made 35 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, so on. Listen to what I made back then. They are listening to a timepiece of their grandmother or grandfather. They're listening to how they were as a person back then. It's not that, the mix could be better and maybe 4K on your guitar was a little off. No, they're not thinking that at all. They're thinking, this was my grandfather 40 years ago, making music with his friends, with his buddies. I can't think of a better way. I can't think of a better goal to have in music production than that? To capture your perfect performance and your perfect song for who you are right now, today, to share with the world, and even just to share with your family. So, one last thing I have written down here is I want you to accept your own work as a reflection of who you are now. I want you to accept it and truly, truly accept it and let it go and let it out there and let it flourish and let it do its thing. Because if all they would have done, all the Beatles would have done was waited until they were perfect before they released a song, they would have released one song in their entire career. They would have peaked at one spot and that would have been it. And then they would have written one song and it would have been over with. No one wants that. No one wants that at all. We like to listen to those older albums and hear how they changed and how they evolved over time and how their writing style changed and how the band members would start to argue with each other and how that would reflect in the music itself. We love this. We love listening to that and we love hearing that. And we love diving deep into those stories. The same thing goes for you in your creative adventures. Just accept your own work right now as a perfect reflection of who you are and get it out there and move on to the next thing. I hope this video gave you some peace. I hope you got some value out of it. Let me know what you think about music production, what your 3 or 5 year goals are for music production, and I'd love to break that down because this is a conversation I have a lot with a lot of music producers, and a lot of them say similar things, but I really was kind of taken back by that. So what are your 3 and 5 year goals? And then what are your 10-year goals? I'd love to hear them. Let me know down in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next one.